Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Joining me today is Gen Harimohan Iyer, and we're going to discuss about China again back to its old tricks, trying to see if it can encircle India and what is going on, what is the situation on the ground with various countries, and how is India going to push back on this, because we know that India has had some success in trying to bring back its neighbors into its fold. So let's welcome General Harimohan Iyer. General sir, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaskar. Always good to be on your show, Sriji. Yeah, we can start.
General, see, no sooner had Op Sindoor finished that the fake narrative factory was in full force, including some of the people in the highest echelons of power in United States. And the only thing that has changed is the number of aircraft that have been down, but they don't say which countries the aircraft got down. Let's leave it at that. It's becoming more like a meme joke material. Otherwise, along the ground, see, Maldives, besides having a good friend in India, thoughtlessly went for India out campaign just so that tin pot dictator kind of guy, Muizu could come to power. I'm not going to spare anyone. This is my view, sir. I could be wrong about it. And what has come out is his wife's brothers are seriously radicalized. So Maldives is getting radicalized from one end. On the other side, you're trying to see if you can push India out and China can occupy the place. And I thought India had solved this once and for all when they struck a deal with them that we will make sure that you get water. You're going to build desalination plants in some of your islands. You're going to get the water, and that hopefully will stabilize your economy. But the people, whoever got roused, they were actually turning away the tourists. Expense is a problem, and they also actively shunned the two biggest tourist bodies that used to come to Maldives. One is India and the other one is Israel. Now, Sri Lanka hasn't done something like that. However, Sri Lanka, once in a while, like a jack in the box, somebody will pick up and do something which is out of the blue. And this is despite India being a guarantor for IMF loans for Sri Lanka, and India has actually given, I think, $3 billion so far, and it's continuing. India has basically stabilized their economy. Nobody wants to admit that, and this is what, except for I think one legislator. I'm just setting the context of one legislator in one session in the Sri Lankan Parliament thanked India for its efforts to stabilize the Sri Lankan economy. Come on now, guys, have a heart. We are trying to help you out. Show some gratitude. I mean, I've not spoken to common Sri Lankan today, whether it is in US or in India. I'm just saying this is courtesy. So you went to the brink and we pulled you back. And now Bangladesh is also doing the same thing. What I'm hearing, sir, is despite the additional tariffs on Indian textiles to United States and other places, Indian textiles are enjoying a huge boom right now. Maybe India has figured out a way to sell its textiles not just to US but other countries. Be that as it may, this boom is coming at the expense of Bangladesh primarily. And they are entering into a civil war now. What I'm trying to say is, on all these things, there appears to be a small nugget of truth that is emerging, which is the Chinese hand again. So one way India can say, okay, we are now part of the big club, that these pinpricks will always be there. It is how we deal with them and how we give it back. So I would like you to focus on that part and tell what are the options in front of India. And also you can agree with me or disagree with my observation, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. I'll go with the topic and the topic for the discussion as the start. Is China renewing its efforts to encircle India post Op Sindoor? Of course it is. So I will add to it, when did it stop? So why, whether it was Op Sindoor or otherwise, China has been continuously making efforts to encircle India. So whether it is now or maybe a decade ago, the thing has been there, it's going to continue. So let's be very clear that in the competitive world that we are in, and the only competitor for regional hegemony in Asia being China, China is going to continuously make every effort to try and pull down India as much as it possible. That's the first point. The second point stems from what you laid out as a basic structure for today's talk, right? So let's go back to 1947 when India got independence. So you had India being created, you had Pakistan being created. Somewhere a year later, Ceylon became an independent country. Maldives, etc., all followed suit. So in 75 years, because of its sheer growth capacity and its size, India had to grow to a state where it has grown. The problem is that these nations who are around India considered themselves to be one amongst equals. So when, let's say, that's why last time when we discussed, I brought this issue of SARC. So let's go back to 40 years ago when SARC was conceived by Ziaul Haq. If you know, Ziaul Haq was the architect of SARC.
I didn't know that.
He wanted to create a local this thing where Pakistan can also be a person to be counted, right? And it was quite okay for us to be part of because SARC was kind of a equivalent for ASEAN, which was being created in Southeast Asia. So we also went along with it, hoping that it is going to sort out large amount of our issues. Unfortunately, what has happened is in 40 years down the line, it is more give and less take. So they want everything, but they are not willing to give anything to you. So in that context, these kind of organizations don't last. And that is where Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bangladesh, to some extent Nepal, and of course Pakistan find themselves today. So you talked about Bangladesh suffering as far as their textile exports are concerned. Bangladesh was totally dependent on the Indian corridor as far as export of their textiles. So when the tariff boom came and hit us, and Bangladesh tried to take advantage of it, India cut their corridor of movement of their goods to ports. If you are going to be my competitor, why should I give you my port? As a result, while our goods became expensive due to tariffs, our competitors' goods became expensive due to the extra distance and other ways and means they had to use to export.
Logistics, yeah.
Logistics became difficult. They haven't realized that it is going to hit them even bad because by and large, the kind of disturbance that is happening in Bangladesh, all its industry is going to take a hit. And in the bargain, what is going to happen is, because tariffs will be loaded onto the consumer, the cost of the product will go up. And you mentioned something about has India lost out? India's trade has actually not seen that kind of a drop which was visualized. If you recollect in one of your earlier shows, I had mentioned that there are multiple means to put goods across to the destination, whether directly or through indirect means. There are intermediaries in between who are very much interested to take their cut and ensure that the goods reach where it has to reach. So let's look at who benefits. Let's take some common textile brands that are there in the US. Let's take Gap for the matter, right? So if you come to Tirupur today, you'll find at least 50, 60 of these small concerns making huge amount of material for Gap. Okay. Now, if you put tariffs on it, what is going to happen? It is the company which is going to pay, and at the end, the cost on ground will go up. So that is something. As far as the government of US is concerned, they get the money. They get the money from the exporter. But ultimately, the guy who is going to pay is the person who is purchasing that good. And if there is no competition, the cost of the material will go up. That's how oil prices have been hedged all over the world. Right? So,
yeah,
tariffs have a limited effect as far as trade is concerned. Yes, we have to look at alternatives, and that is something we can discuss over another session. I guess it needs a lot of talk. In fact, this LNG purchase and the Russian oil, all that needs to be again discussed separately. We may look at a separate session for that. Okay. Now coming back to the topic of today. Let's look at what is encirclement. everybody says we are getting encircled. So encirclement can be from the land, it can be around the maritime boundaries, it can be in spheres which are not very clearly describable. I can say information, cyber, space, all this can be used for encirclement. While and when you look at encirclement, you are trying to deny access to a person to be able to do his duty or his job correctly. That is the main aim of encirclement. And any nation which is trying to impose its will on the other will try and encircle it in whichever way possible, cut down its avenues, reduce its avenues to export, reduce its avenues of influence across the board. So, in my mind, as far as China is concerned, it was always interested in minimizing India's influence in the region, especially in the Indian Ocean region, and that is another topic which needs very deliberate discussion. I don't know whether you've done it before or not, but I guess it's time we discuss that also someday. Okay, can you put that map which I sent to you?
Yes, sir. Coming up.
Yeah.
Focus.
Okay. Before I describe this map, I went to the staff college in India and I interacted with my naval, colleagues. So they made me read the Indian map the right way. The right way to read the Indian map is not for looking up at north. It is always to look it from the north to the south. You see, what happens is when Indians by nature have been landlocked people. We have been people who have never gone beyond our border other than Rajaraja Chola and some elements who expanded their influence into the Southeast Asia. By and large, Indian history does not show us to be expansionists. We were happy to be within our own continent. To that extent, when you look at the Indian map and you look at it from north to south, and you look at the way the peninsular India juts into the Indian Ocean, it divides the entire Indian Ocean if you look at it from Australia in the east and South Africa in the west, and you put the, let's say, Kanyakumari or the Cape Comorin as the center point, draw a line, it splits the Indian Ocean into two verticals. And this jutting out of this peninsular India actually gives you the complete dominance of the area starting from the Horn of Africa in the west right down to Australia. And that is what we as Indian strategists look at India's areas of influence. This entire rim, starting from South Africa in the west, running right across the African coast into the Middle East, come down, go across Indonesia, Java, all the way to Australia. You look at this whole region, the only dominant power in this region is India. China is nowhere here. All right? Other nations are not as powerful both economically or militarily to be able to dominate this kind of a region. And that's why maybe in the last discussion of ours I mentioned that if you remove India from Quad, it becomes a straight line. It does not remain a Quad anymore. And if you want Indo-Pacific to be dominated, when I use the word Indo very deliberately, it is the Indian Ocean region that needs to be dominated. Because if you look at the same map, look at the Persian Gulf or the Strait of Hormuz, which is on the top northwest corner of this map, the entire sea lines of communication flows down along these two lines, goes along the Indian Peninsula, and then goes towards what is known as the Malacca and the Sunda Straits. These are these two little bit of gaps between Malaysia and Indonesia to the north, and Malaysia and Indonesia and Java to the south. These are the only two gaps from where you can access Pacific or what we can call South China and East China Sea. And entire region, if you look at, is dominated by the peninsula jutting out of Indian Peninsula, which is jutting out into the Indian Ocean. And almost 60% of the world's trade flows through this region. So anybody who dominates this region will dominate the world as far as economy is concerned. And that is why this region becomes extremely important and cannot be uh, ignored, if I was to use the word. Pacific and Atlantic have had their own share of history in the last century, but in the coming years, Indian Ocean will be the area which needs to be dominated. So, having said that, now look at how India is. You have the Andaman Nicobar Islands far east of India, and if you put a concentric circle of, let's say, 500 nautical miles from the center of Andaman Nicobar, you will hit Malacca and Sunda Straits, which means anybody who holds Andaman and Nicobar Islands and holds it strongly can influence any movement that happens between South China Sea and into the Indian Ocean. And as long as you are physically holding it, you are dominating that entire sphere. I'll come to the encirclement a little later. Go to the west, you find this set of Lakshadweep Islands, which extends into the Maldives. Go further south, you see Seychelles and Mauritius. Now, if you put a kind of presence in all these four spheres, you dominate the western side of the Indian Ocean. And any shipping lane which moves in the area from either Strait of Hormuz or the Persian Gulf will have to transit this area. And therefore, again, you can dominate it. No, I'll come back to this later. Go back to the old one. Yeah. So therefore, let's see why are we worried about encirclement? So let's go to the next slide. See, the problem with China is its energy has to flow from South America, Africa, and the Middle East all the way to its mainland, which happens to be in the easternmost portion of this map. That's where mainland China is. All right. It has to transit through the South China Sea, go through these two straits, go across the Indian Ocean, either to the north or to the south. This entire area, it does not have any foothold. So if you look at Hambantota, which was one of the bases which we get worried about, Hambantota is so far away from Chinese mainland that even if it becomes a military base, it cannot survive on its own. It can be taken out anytime. And if it gets into hostilities, Hambantota is not going to stay as a military base ever. What I look at Hambantota is mainly a transit point where the sea routes from Persian Gulf and the African continent which are headed towards China can be marshaled. And thereafter it can take a route either through Myanmar or through the straits towards the eastern part of China. So whether you're looking at southwestern part of China or the eastern part of China, they have to find routes where they have to find ports where they can take their shipping so that they minimize both in terms of time and money. And therefore, all these ports which are loosely termed as strings of pearls. You heard of this terminology called China's string of pearls. It primarily is to facilitate movement of trade into China. While it is looking at it, when you look at Gwadar in the west, Hambantota in the south, and let's say Sitwe or what is now called Kyapku or Chittagong in the north, if you put it together, it looks as if China is holding all the four corners and boxing India into it. Now let's assume they are holding it very strongly, all these four areas. And you look at the peninsular India thereafter and its areas of influence. If you don't break out of this so-called encirclement, you will not be able to dominate those areas which I had mentioned earlier. To that extent, these strings of pearls or whatever it is a cause of concern. And it is not a new phenomenon. It has been there for the last 25-30 years in some form or the other, and yet to be realized of any value as far as military is concerned. Though Chinese Navy has been showing its presence in these areas, but China's Navy is still yet to be a full blue water Navy. It has still got years to match up to what the US or the Russian navies are. So it needs a little time. That having said, It is a cause of concern, and we have to look at ways to neutralize it. We can go away from the slide now. Thank you. So, in that context, when I look at India, okay, before I get there, I look at the land boundary also. Since a lot of talk has happened over a period of time. See, India shares a border, a very long border with China, starting from the Karakoram Pass or the KK Pass in the north, runs along the entire stretch of Himalayas to the east to a place called Kibutu, which is the easternmost part of India-China border. Thereafter, India's border shifts towards Myanmar. And as we discussed therefore yesterday, there's a lot of talk that, by and large, Chinese influence in Myanmar is increasing. So, willy-nilly, this border may go down right up to Sitwe, right across the entire Myanmar. And it is not again a new phenomenon. This is something the Indian armed forces have been talking about for over 2 decades. And in various contingencies, we are looking at some kind of Chinese development both along Myanmar border towards our eastern areas. So to that extent, it is not something that has happened post Op Sindoor. Now let's see what has been the situation along the land borders. 2016 Doklam incident happened, and the entire eastern portion of the line of actual control by and large got activated. There has been some movement of regularizing, but by and large the degree of continuity of whatever movement has happened is continued. So we are holding on there. Then you come across the central sector where the Nepalese border comes. There have been instances of China coming into the area of Lipu Lake and those places near the Nepalese border, and we have also responded there. If you come to the further north in Ladakh, what has happened since 2021 when the Galwan incident happened and we mobilized. So right from KK Pass in the north, right up to Kibutu in the east, the Indian armed forces are counter managing the border with the Chinese on the other side. So it's not something that has happened after Sindoor. It has been there for more than 10 years. And we have been able to hold our own. And the Chinese have also realized that they don't have any headway in this area. By and large, over a period of time, there has been talks of de-escalating and regularizing the borders. There's also been talk that we'll push the border issues aside like we did in the 90s and start looking at other areas of coexistence. How it pans out is something for all of us to see. Whether India will jump in without any assurance or India will make hard bargains with China, these are some things to see. Coming on towards Pakistan, the CPEC is not a new phenomenon. The CPEC has been there for more than last 7-8 years. In fact, the Karakoram highway has been there for more than 30 years. The Chinese have already developed it through the Pakistan occupies Kashmir up to Pakistani Punjab. And they have been in development of various parts of Pakistan because they need a warm water port in the Arabian Sea. It helps them. If they are able to get Gwadar as a base, the flow of oil through Pakistan can reach the western part of China, Tibet, where they need it, much cheaper than what will happen if the entire oil has to go, let's say, to Shanghai or Guangzhou and then move through the land borders. To that extent, yeah. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Sir, transporting it by road or using a pipeline from Gwadar to Tibet?
Anything. Pipeline has its own problems because you have to have a lot of pumps, etc., to push it. But to best of my knowledge, they are looking at road, rail, and pipeline, multiple modes of transporting, including even inland waterways, because the Indus, if you look at it, flows right across the center of Pakistan. So whichever mode you look at it, they are going to exploit all of them. It's not just going to be one. But that having said, it is Chinese way of looking at. Similarly, when you look at Kyapkyu or Sitwe, erstwhile Sitwe in Myanmar, it's the shortest route to reach Gonza or Chengdu and areas which are towards the south and southwest of China. So those areas are much better access to Myanmar rather than coming through Hong Kong or those sides. So they are looking at these ports, and it is not a new phenomenon. So their presence is going to be there. So we are talking about the land presence. So Pakistan being a proxy state to China in any future Indo-China war is a given. So we have this argument whenever we sit into our various sets of war games and exercises that will China collude with Pakistan, should we engage in a war with Pakistan? And by and large, the answer is no. They will not like to interfere in that kind of an operation. But on the counter side, if we say if we get into an operation with China, will Pakistan enter it? The answer is 100% yes. So it provides China kind of a leverage on towards the western portion of India to keep us engaged. So to that extent, that part that Pakistan being a proxy state of China continues to be there. So that is the larger part of how to look at how we are getting encircled. Getting on to the third dimension, which I mentioned earlier about, let's say, information. China is leading, one of the leading nations as far as info warfare is concerned. We discussed TikTok a couple of weeks back on your own show. It actually controls narrative almost across the world. India was one of those countries which banned TikTok because it was creating too much of negative influence on our population. To that extent, by and large, I guess we should be prepared to see China being leader in these kind of areas as far as information is concerned, as also in terms of cyber warfare. Chinese hackers have shown their capabilities in various events and hack events which have happened across the world, and they have shown their capabilities. So to that extent, those areas, which is a third dimension, we were getting encircled and will continue to get encircled. So that is the larger portion of the basic structure which we say as to how China is poised against India. Now let's say, what can India do? That is the larger question. So if you see in the last 6-8 months, there has been renewed development towards taking or exploiting the Andaman and Nicobar Islands as a base. The Andaman and Nicobar Command was created about 15-18 years back, but till date it has not got the kind of teeth that possibly it deserves and it needs. And I am seeing a major development happening in that manner. So many people ask me what's the use of having Andaman and Nicobar Island as a base. I look at it as a static aircraft carrier. The Andaman has got so many islands which can be used as multiple launch points. And like I said, 500 nautical miles, you can influence the area that you need to influence. So that is going to happen over a period of time. You mentioned Maldives. Last 7-8 months, you see how Maldives has changed its stance. It has realized that without India, it cannot survive. And China can show its overtures, but China is not the person to go to. And I see, even in the current dispensation in Maldives, these people will come back, and they'll come back to India. May not give us static bases the way we had earlier, but the area of influence will remain with India. As far as Sri Lanka is concerned, Sri Lanka is historically linked to India, and it has realized the problem of going with China, especially the kind of money they have invested and which they have to repay to China, and they will not make that mistake again. So these are three areas which I find by and large India should not get worried about. As we discussed day before yesterday, Bangladesh is a cause of worry. Bangladesh is a cause of worry because it can create nuisance value to us, especially in those areas which are a little cut off from us. We were talking about the Siliguri corridor and the connect to the northeast. Bangladesh, by by its location, geolocation, strategically controls that kind of an area, and they can make nuisance value to us. So we need to be a little concerned. And they are creating demographical problems in our east, which has been discussed on various forums. I would like to go into those political ends of discussions. But needless to say, it is changing demographies, especially in states like Bengal and Tripura, where there is a huge amount of influx of refugees. In Assam, uh, has been controlled to some levels, but by and large, that's a cause of concern, especially in terms of how they will behave should there be a conflict situation, especially with China in the east. And what we discussed the other day, and I said we need longer period to discuss this aspect of Bangladesh, especially in the current scenario. And post Op Sindoor, and especially after Sheikh Hasina has been removed from power, Bangladesh has become a cause of concern and needs to be monitored very, very closely. Myanmar, it is blow hot, blow cold. There are positive swings, there are negative swings. But let's be very, very clear that Myanmar in adversity will be, you know, pulled in by China. I won't even say pushed towards China, because the very might that China has the domination of Myanmar by its land borders, they will possibly use Myanmar as a proxy state. And Myanmar, willingly or unwillingly, will be forced to go into China's lap. So that is another area which needs to be monitored, as we discussed again day before yesterday. So you add Myanmar and Bangladesh, there are causes of concern in the last 4 5 months of something that India needs to look out for. Now let's see how we can counter this. We need to network. So if you look at Gwadar can be countered by this IMEC corridor we discussed the other day. Once the IMEC opens up, the trade routes to Europe and the US will open up. In fact, not only US and Canada, and it will create a huge amount of disparity. And whatever China plans to gain from Gwadar will get lost. In fact, Gwadar will lose its total relevance, if I was to use the word. I don't know how Iran and Balochistan is going to play up. If one is reading it correctly, there is more to come, both in Iran as well as Balochistan, and it is going to affect China's presence in Pakistan. To that effect, I guess uh, Pakistan needs to be looked at as to how it is able to negotiate the unrest, especially along its western borders, and keep the Chinese amused to continue investing into CPEC. Because the moment Chinese start losing their men, I don't see them showing that kind of support and interest towards Pakistan as it is shown in the last many years. To that, I'm looking at what happens to Balochistan, especially, and to some extent how Iran behaves in the next few years. Because I don't think what happened in June, July in Iran is the end all of it. There is more to come, and Iran will come back to where it was maybe a couple of years back. This, in nutshell, is how I look at China and its effects on India. I personally feel that we need to grow together, and it is no time for confrontation, and that is what the Prime Minister has also said in his various speeches. In fact, Prime Minister has also reached out to China, and I think we discussed that also in one of our podcasts. That there are ways and means to bring back some degree of normality along China, because it's in both countries' interests. If India does not interfere with Chinese line of shipping lines, and China does not interfere with India's trade, it is win-win for both the countries. And both countries have to grow, and both have ambitions to grow. So to that extent, I see there is a possibility that this can be negotiated, and I'm sure people are working towards it. Whether it happens or not, these are questions, because there are so many places where we have differences. For example, when this SCO summit happened after Op Sindoor, China was prompt enough to support Pakistan. China has been trying to get Pakistan into BRICS, and being very, very vehemently proactive towards getting Pakistan into BRICS. So there are areas where a lot of diplomacy and work needs to be done. and convey to people that it is better that we grow mutually and not be confrontation to each other. I look at Quad getting revived, maybe end of this year or sometime next year. We will find again the talks of Quad coming up, because the US cannot allow China to grow without increasing or reduce its influence, especially in areas like Philippines and South China Sea. It wants to maintain its influence in that area, and because they are very much worried about Japan and Philippines and the areas to the west, to the east, towards the western part of the US. So the growing Chinese influence is going to be bringing US back into the game of Quad. Whether it happens in the second year of the current presidency or a little later is something we can see. But I do see both India and US really cooperating in those areas, and the defense deal which was signed is possibly indicative to the fact that the Quad is still alive. And Quad is possibly is one alignment which is going to keep Chinese influence in this region at bay, because they don't want to get into a confrontation when they are growing. It's part of their policy to say that we will try and keep those areas of confrontation till the time we achieve our aims and goals. So they are still working on it. So we don't see them getting into a confrontationist mode as of now. So this is all I think I would like to put across. I'm open to questions and we can discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we go to questions from our viewers, I have one question. If you look at the map that you just showed, access for China through Sitwe seems to be a lot easier than to go from Gwadar, do a CPEC, and then navigate. Yet China persists on doing both, and now they are also trying to use through Chittagong. I think Chittagong is no starter. I don't know non-starter. Through some very difficult terrain.
Sitwe, Sriji has got some limitations. By its Sitwe as the way the waterways are engineered around Sitwe, they have got limitations. That's why they need an alternative in Chittagong. That is as far as this is concerned. As far as Gwadar is concerned, you look at the distance from Gwadar to, let's say, Strait of Hormuz, where the oil is being picked up from the Middle East. It is very short turnover for their ships to travel from Gwadar to wherever they have to pick, and then pump it through pump pipelines or whatever land routes into western part of China. So there will be multiple modes which China will use. They'll use the straits to take the trade to the eastern part of China. They'll use Sitwe and or Pakku, what's it's called now, and Chittagong towards its southwestern part. And of course, as far as Tibet and the areas to the north, they may use Gwadar. And I don't think Gwadar is as of now fully ready, and neither is China ready to operationalize Gwadar as its mainstays. They will still use Hambantota as the focal, and then try and see which is the best way to take it there.
Thank you, sir. In fact, I'll tell you, when I was looking at the CPEC corridor, the only way they can essentially have a trouble-free corridor cutting across Pakistan is to create a buffer zone along the corridor ways. 20 kilometers this side, 20 kilometers this side. The problem for them is they also wanted to be having some economic viability. Now, that means they are cutting through the heart of Pakistan, Punjab, fertile fields. And they are saying, we are going to create a buffer area of 20 kilometers on either side of the roads and the way. And here, no Pakistani can own land. It's all going to be us. China is going to basically have like a Chinese colony all the way up. I mean, this is what the story came out in Atlantic newspaper in US.
It's very much on the cards, because they don't, the Chinese, like I said, I think I mentioned again in your show only, they are worse than Shylocks. The Shylock can be more gentleman than Chinese. So they will take their pound of flesh and they'll take the blood along with it. And that having said, the problem with CPEC today is, they were trying to keep it as far away from Indian borders as possible. And they kept it alongside the Indus. When you look at the Indus, it transits right in the center of Pakistan, from northeast to southwest. So the CPEC corridor, as it's coming up, is coming up towards the western part of the Indus. But they did not realize that Balochistan will be a problem. And 50% of CPEC runs through Balochistan. And Balochistan, Pakistan has not been able to control. And the Chinese are worried that if their goods start getting, affected, that's why they are taking too long to make it operational. CPEC, if you again, we discussed BRI one of these days, and I mentioned that day also. CPEC was to tell the world that China can create a border and road initiative, because they were getting stuck in the other aspect, the one which was going towards Turkey through the Central Asia. They were getting stuck. So this was possibly a demonstrative method to show that yes, China is capable of creating this kind of a trade route. And unfortunately, or rather I'll say fortunately for us, it is not fructified. I don't see it fructifying in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you so much, sir. Let's take some questions now. Just 1 second, sir. Yeah. Thank you, Joseph, for becoming a YouTube member. Next one. Neelakantan Naresh wants to know, holding fort at Nicobar and Seychelles is why all are interested in Bangladesh and Arctic routes for China. Also, Himalayan influence to get Bangladesh and Seven Sisters. Your views, sir.
Multiple things you have brought out. Okay, as far as Nicobar is concerned, you see, Andaman and Nicobar chain are two separate lines, and they are divided by, it's I think called a 7- corridor or 9-. I'm forgetting the latitude at which they get divided. So they are two separate chains of islands. So Andaman dominates the northern part of that channel, and Nicobar dominates the southern part of the channel. So sitting at Nicobar, you are able to take any route which is bypassing this channel and going towards Indonesia, towards the Malacca Strait. And that is why Nicobar is important. As far as Seychelles is concerned, Seychelles and Mauritius, they are our bases, or they are areas which we want to show as far as our areas of interest towards the Horn of Africa. Like I mentioned in the beginning, India's interest is in the entire Indian Ocean, as seen from the way you look at from north to south along the peninsula. So when you look at it, it is very difficult to dominate those areas from mainland India, and therefore you needed some areas, especially closer to the African continent, and therefore that is why Seychelles is required. Now, why are we interested in Bangladesh and Bangladesh? Everyone is interested in Bangladesh because any country which is unstable is up for grabs. So that is the normal routine thing in the world. Today, Bangladesh is unstable. Bangladesh, let me tell you, has got a lot of resources, untapped resources. So it is quite capable of being used as a major value asset. So to that extent, people are interested in Bangladesh, especially China is interested in Bangladesh, because its influence in Bangladesh will give it access not just in Myanmar, but also in the areas which are more adjunct to India. And therefore, it can put full pressure. That's why I said we need to discuss Myanmar and Bangladesh as a combined threat from the Chinese side towards India, because once that happens, our entire northeast, especially right down from Orissa upwards, along the complete 8 states of the northeast, will get into Chinese influence. So that is something which should worry us. As far as Arctic routes to China is concerned, it is a very, very long route. It has to transit the entire the Russian landscape and come down to the northern part of China, and that too the ports are closed for 6 to 8 months. So it has its own limitations, and I don't think China will like to box itself only on the Arctic route. Not having said that, I think they are quite interested to go along with Russia to keep the Arctic route open. As far as influence to Bangladesh and Seven Sisters, I think I have given my point of view.
Next one, please. Mangat Ranga wants to know, our forces are capable of handling China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc., the external threats. But the real threat is the 0.5 front being supported by external forces. Is Bharat keeping up to this also?
I can say that any country which grows and becomes capable to defend itself from external threats will face challenges along its internal dynamics. To that extent, powers who have capability to influence your internal dynamics will try and create fissures, whether it is in the form of Naxalism, which has been there for more than 5 decades now. Now it's dying out. In fact, if you heard the Prime Minister say yesterday, Home Minister say yesterday, he's put the date of 31st March 2026 when he says, I'll eradicate Naxalism totally from India. It will be a huge achievement. We have had insurgency along our northeastern states right from the time 1950s. That has been by and large taken out. Especially, it was almost done when Manipur blew up a couple of years back, and once again we got involved to some extent. So you will find these kind of things being, churned out as far as the 0.5 front is concerned. Now, I will not get into the demography part of it because you can initiate this kind of a front by creating multiple polarized methods. So need not be just religion based; it can be based on any dynamics. Like I said, that's why I took the example of the Naxals, who did not get into a cause because of their religion, but they got into the cause because they got bought into the system that they have been neglected and their resources are being taken out. So if you can influence that, you will definitely retard a country's growth. So it is a cause of worry. I'm not denying that, and we are done quite well. I can tell you this: a nation which has been pulled around from various sides, and multiple agencies of powers who have interest in India's growth, or rather, I'll say impeding India's growth. They have their hands in it. So I will not just put the blame on one side. There are multiple agencies which are trying to influence this 0.5 front, and we are worried to be able to negotiate it. It is going to be a challenge, and let me say that the security forces, to some extent, and many state governments to a large extent, they have come forward. And the very fact that something which was a huge cause of concern about 10 years back, when you had an entire corridor right from Nepal right down to Kerala infested with Naxalism, has now come down to, I believe, 8 to 10 districts, which also by and large is going to get removed in the next 6 to 8 months. So there are ways and means to take care of this 0.5 front, and Indian security agencies are quite adept at it. Thank you.
Last question. Rahul Pal wants to know, why can't India be proactive and show its muscular approach towards other countries? Your opinion matters. What do you think happened in the 10% pull away from Middle East towards US to get the LPG gas? What do you think that was? Was that not muscular approach? Sir, your thoughts?
Absolutely, 100%. I wanted to say this. It has two sides to the coin. The first is the economic side, and that is basic logic. Jo jahan pe sasta milega, you'll go and buy it. And I guess it is applicable to each one of us. So tomorrow, if you go to a store which sells same item on a sale, and the same thing is available at a costly rate in another store, you'll go to the store which is selling cheaper, right? So that is the basic logic which India has applied as far as energy purchase is concerned. And not only have we purchased at low cost, we have been able to make money by selling it at higher cost. So that is good business, if I was to use the word, which Trump is getting agitated by because he feels that there's an opportunity which has got lost. He's also right in his own mind because he's worried about his own business interests. But let's be very clear, might doesn't have to be always pushed. Large amount of things are done silently, and you don't have to get into a confrontation, but you can show your capacities. So when you show your capacities, whether it is in the military domain, whether it's in the political domain, whether it's in the diplomatic domain, whether it's in the economic domain, you will indicate to the other guy that please don't interfere with me, I'm very strong. And that is something which a nation has to put together. The problem with us is there are some fissures, and that is normal in a democracy where two people won't look the same way for every problem that is confronted by them, because each one has to find his own dynamic in the solution. But that having said, by and large, we have done quite well. As a nation, in the last 75 years, we have grown pretty well, and the way we are headed to, I am sure, the next 15, 20 years, as things go right, whichever dispatch, I'm very clear in my mind, the things have been put in such a way that whichever be the dispensation in power, nobody can stop India's growth to where it is headed to. We may get delayed by 4 or 5 years from what target sites have been set. So therefore, we don't have to show our muscularity. You can smile and show that yes, we are still here. Many people thought that during COVID, India is going to be one of the nations which will get wiped off, because a lot of people had doubts about our medical capacities, and we displayed that India was possibly one of those countries which managed COVID the best. We were the ones who were able to vaccinate 1.5 billion people, not once, not twice, but thrice over, and that also free of cost. So capacities are there, and these kind of capacities are visible to other nations. And when they look at it, they realize, yes, we are talking to a nation which is quite capable. And that is how you show your muscularity. You don't have to be, aggressive in all count. Elephants' tusks are good enough to scare people.
Actually, India has not taken an IMF loan or World Bank loan in a long time now. I think 30, 25, 30 years now.
We can give loan now.
Yeah. And when there is a natural calamity inside India, India says, no thanks, we can manage it. And then, as a matter of fact, India sends groups over to other countries to help them. What is Operation Dost?
You were the first one to respond to Turkey. You were the first ones to respond to...
I was going to Operation Dost. Yeah.
We are the first ones to respond to Indonesia, and the India-Indonesia terms and conditions changed the way we responded to the tsunami. So it is not now, it has been there, whichever dispensation has been there. We have a very, very powerful organization, let me be very clear. You may not see it because of various noises that are made in the political domain, but as a nation, we are a very strong nation.
Go to China and ask them to guess who you are. Find out you'll be surprised with the answer. They'll call you an Hindu.
Hindu.
Yes. Thank you so much, General Iyer. And viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. You can see that our good General Harimohan Iyer has many more dimensions to him than just being a military expert. And we're going to draw upon this in our episodes to come. And what a pleasure it was to talk to you, sir, and to listen to you. And viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and also put in by way of comments how you think about this format. We are always trying to see how best we can use the time and come up with useful content. Thank you once again, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar.